Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, colleagues, people of Guam, half a day. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. Today is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2020, and the time now is 2:04. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, January 19th. Next one was issued on Thursday, January 21st, and then issued on Monday, January 25th, and then issued on January 29th. Today, for the record, today is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021, and the time now is 2:04. Committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 3-36, introduced by Senator Jim Moylan and co-sponsored by Senator Tony Ada, Senator Chris Duenas, and Senator Frank Bloss Jr. An act to amend Section 26203.3 of Chapter 26, Title 11, Guam Code annotated relative to increasing the gross threshold for limited exemption on the business privilege tax for certain small business. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues that are here today. We have Speaker Teresa Lai. We have Minority Leader, the author of the bill, Senator Jim Moylan. We have Senator Joanne Brown. We have Senator Tony Ada, we have Senator Chris Duenas, and we have Senator Telo Taidagui. The general rules for this public hearing: those testifying on behalf of Bill 3-36 will be recognized by myself and invited to the panel. And we don't have anybody that's listed, Senator Moylan. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopy. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Testimony shall be confined to the substance if there was any. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony once. Once you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room. Being that there's no one here, so we're just going to skip that. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceeding. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony or may be asked to leave the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will state your name. There is no one here, I would ask Senator Jim Moylan to please give his opening on his bill, and then make his statement. And then I'll ask the colleagues if they want to ask the author of the bill to yield to any of their questions or make any statements on their behalf. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues, for your presence, and thank you also for my co-sponsors to be present here today regarding Bill 3-36, which our chairman has read the title of. Basically, what this bill is doing is it regards the DeSantis Act. Originally, this bill this public law was changed for the DeSantis Act back in the 35th Guam legislature in its public law 35-13, which was effective of May 7, 2019. So what we're doing with this bill is adjusting that public law 35-13. So originally, that public law 35-13 increased the deductions up to $250,000. And there was a fiscal note that discussed 35-13, and it affected about 1,050 companies on Guam that were eligible to take additional tax benefits from that public law. The fiscal note also mentioned what the general fund impact was, which is approximately a loss of $1.36 million. Now, bill number 3-36 that we're here today to discuss, what this bill does is increase from that $250,000 exemption to $500,000 to the exemption. And it will retro the effective date, if it passed into law, retro back to January 1st of 2021. And then this bill was sunset on December 21st, 2022. BBMR did provide a fiscal note as well for Bill 3-36. And basically they're unsure of the financial impact at this time due to COVID, but what they do know, it will be less in collections for the government of Guam. So why propose this measure then? Recently there was also, in support of this bill, I believe, is a study done by the University of Guam for 2020, the Economic Impact Report. And it noted that our economy declined by 18.9% in 2019. And without the federal stimulus of $1.6 billion into Guam's economy, this decline would have been up to 49%. And they noted a continuous decline in the future here, near future, because of our tourism industry has reduced by 76%. And that equaled an amount of $1.38 billion. We have lost in employment, and of course we have lost in tax revenues for the government of Guam. And the employment that they figured was unemployment between anywhere of 20 to 26% decline. And the important thing in regards to this bill is a decrease in spending of 30 to 50% of income by our population. So what we're doing now and why we're introducing this bill is that our businesses need to open. They need to hire their employees. They need to restock. They need to pay their bills. They need to do their inventory. They had to pay their rent and all of their expenses involved that they've been considering for the last 10, 11 months now. And slowly, our island is getting open. We increased our PCOR level, which is a good thing, and our hospitalization has gone down as well. But how can we help the businesses now? They have an economic impact greatly, and this bill intends to do that, to allow our small businesses, over 1,000 of them, to take additional incentives. Imagine how would feel to try to reopen your business at this time, knowing that there's a decrease in spending of almost 50%, knowing that we had the highest rate of unemployment that we've seen in I don't know how long ago, and knowing that tourism, which impacts a lot of the businesses here on Guam, is not back to where it used to be. It's a great risk. So by providing these, lessening the taxes initially just for this amount of time, we're hoping that this would help our businesses get back on their feet. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to present and hear this bill, and I'm looking forward to any discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moreland. Madam Speaker, do you have anything you would like to comment about the bill, make a statement about the bill, or ask any question to the author?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I would, note for the record, neither BBMR nor DOA is here, nor Revenue Tax, and I would have liked to ask them some questions. But of course, we're all here to find a way to assist small businesses, to assist families, those who've been unemployed, those who are facing furloughs. We saw the long, long lines for food that continue 9 months later, or almost a year later now. We have still lines for food. And even though the government of Guam cut $67 million in its budget last year, we're looking at an increased deficit, I guess, for this current fiscal year, according to the revenue reports that we are receiving currently. But so BBMR, in their fiscal note, has pointed out that this bill, which proposes to exempt the first $500,000 a company earns from the 5% BPT and only subject that to the 3% BPT, BBMR says that BPT collections have experienced an approximate 7.6 million collection shortfall below adopted levels per Public Law 35-99. The Bureau is unable to determine an approximate financial impact at this time. However, the Bureau notes that additional exemptions from BPT remittances will exacerbate the shortfall noted above for FY21 and the potential first quarter collections for FY22. So they give us a general summary that there will be impacts, but we're really not privy to details, Mr. Chair. During the governor's address to the Guam Chamber on January 27, she said, quote, "With the amendments to the Dave Santos Act, we've cut taxes for our smallest businesses prior to the pandemic. These tax cuts enjoyed bipartisan support, and now 85% of taxpayers who file GRT, the businesses making $250,000 or less in gross annual income, pay a 3% BPT, not 5%. And that was the first time I had heard that 85% of taxpayers figure, Mr. Chair, and that was very significant to me because that was not what was predicted when we passed that law, the exemption. So no one's making a prediction as to how many businesses, above 85% of the businesses this bill will impact, but I would like to have asked the agencies that, if they would be able to calculate that. Dr. Ru Wayne, who is an economics professor up at the University of Guam, among her other titles, in her 2020 economic report highlighted businesses that were able to stay open during the pandemic. She said those considered essential, as defined by the Chalan Parahinemblu guidelines by the Guam Recovery Panel of Advisors, various executive orders and public health guidance, those able to align their business operations to the demands of the pandemic restrictions, for example, restaurants that provided drive-through pickup or delivery services, those that sell furniture, those that sell vehicles, where the latest data from the Department of Motor Vehicles show vehicle registrations in June 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, to be only slightly lower than in June 2019, pre-pandemic. 524 versus 532 vehicles registered a year earlier. Those that provide internet service as the demand for it increases as many activities, work, school, social, had transitioned from in-person, face-to-face to online platforms. Those involved in construction, especially but not limited to military projects. Those involved in months of quarantine operation, including hotels, catering services, laundry services, and others, with $4 million of the federally funded CARES Act for the Small Business Pandemic Assistance Program, administered by GIDA, reallocated towards the payment of hotel quarantine facilities. And she cites all of these references, Mr. Chair. Liz Duenas, in talking about the aid that businesses had received from GIDA, in a recent article, Liz Duenas is a realtor, Mr. Chair, one of the officers, I believe, of the Realtors Association. She says, a GIDA rental grant is a plus. It definitely helps. What would help more, she said, is to allow businesses to open more and reap more revenue. Many are closing. In addition, Duenas said money that tenants get for their own rental relief is not reaching landlords. Many of the landlords are suffering. She said money given to tenants is not always passed on for rent and instead is being used for new vehicle deposits and in some cases discretionary purchases like jewelry. They should have put a caveat that the money goes to the landlord. And I just read that example to highlight that any assistance that will be giving to businesses in this bill, I would like it to be as closely tailored as possible to really those businesses that are in most need of it, that will indeed ensure that the money is going to benefit those who are unemployed or facing furloughs or the threat of furloughs, and that it's going to really benefit the families of Guam. What we don't know is how many businesses are anticipated to qualify for this exemption. How much revenue will the government lose because of this bill? I've asked the Department of Revenue and Taxation Director to try to ascertain. I wrote her a letter prior to this hearing hoping that we could get this for this hearing, but I've asked her to try to ascertain which businesses are struggling so that policies and assistance can be tailored based on the need. So I specifically asked how many businesses have experienced permanent closures since the initial declaration of the state of emergency in March 2020. What category or industry are those businesses? How many businesses have shown a decrease in BP2 between December 2019 and December 2020, and what percentage of decrease? If possible, please parse this information into categories such as 25 to 30% and so on. What category or industry are those businesses? Would DRT be able to provide an estimate that BBMR was not able to provide as to the approximate financial impact of doubling the reach of the lowered BPT? Is DRT able to provide a current count of businesses that would be affected by this legislation so that we may calculate a rough estimate? I had also asked Geeta, in relation to this and the bill that we heard this morning, to please provide the award or evaluation criteria and a list or number of businesses or categories of businesses that have benefited from the Small Business Rent Assistance Grant Program, the Guam Small Business Pandemic Assistance Grant, the Team TEAM Guam Plan, and any other local programs coordinated by Geeta that aim to assist businesses affected by COVID-19. Please also provide the amounts received if possible. Was a decline in gross receipts or other criteria used to prioritize the eligible applicants? In your view, are there additional businesses or industries that have not received local assistance that should be prioritized for further economic support? Do you have any recommendation as to target industries or eligibility requirements for economic aid to ensure that further local assistance is as impactful and cost-effective as possible? Please provide any other information relevant to understanding the full impacts on the various business categories and distinguishing businesses that have been more severely impacted by COVID or where aid would result in greatest benefit to working families. And I've since learned that some of their awards are put up online, but yeah, I'm still waiting for the responses from them. So hopefully we will get that before we proceed on the bill, Mr. Chair. But to summarize, yeah, I just think that if there is a way, again, that we ensure that our goal in considering a measure like this, reducing revenues at a time when we are in critical need of revenues in the government in order to provide critical services, if we're going to do that because we are going to benefit families, unemployed persons, grow these businesses to prevent furloughs, I just want to ensure that we are going to reach that goal in passing this bill. And if we can tailor it exactly to that, then that would be my preference, Mr. Chair. For example, consider tax benefits to the businesses who have seen a significant reduction in their gross revenues or who have not already received GETA relief. These are ideas that I would have liked to flesh out with the agencies if they were here, Mr. Chair. So I just want to state that for the record. So hopefully the committee can consider it and maybe we can either get their input on it or have a further discussion on these things just to tailor the bill to really reach those who we are trying to reach with this. Situs Masi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And yes, we will take those recommendations to consideration. Senator Brown, since you're on the line, we're just going to go down to your right, going down. So, Senator Brown, would you like to speak on the bill or sponsors? Okay, Senator Ada, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've seen this past year now, our island has been through a pandemic that affected everyone. And our small businesses at this time really need the assistance that they can get. We're looking at helping to sustain the small businesses that are still around and hoping that we're able to rebuild our economy to pre-pandemic times. It's going to take one day at a time, one bill at a time. But I think working together, both across the aisle in this body, to ensure that we help those that are in need. And our small businesses are definitely in need. In order to grow the revenues of our government, our tax base, we need to ensure that these businesses are able to open again. And the way to do that is to ensure that we're giving them the best breaks that we can to ensure that they can be able to reopen, reemploy, get people back onto the workforce, and start building our government revenues. We know the federal funds are going to start to continue to slowly go away, but this is the time when we need to ensure that we're building our local general fund revenues. And the only way that we're going to build our local general fund revenues is to ensure that we get businesses to reopen. Right now, we can be collecting 0 out of 0, but offering an additional tax break on the going from 250 to 500,000, the exemption, we'll be able to generate additional revenues, giving those businesses the hand up so that they'll be able to open, so that they'll be able to employ, so that they will be able to pay into the tax base. I ask my colleagues here to please, let's come together. Let's look at what we can do together to ensure that the revenues that are coming into the government continue to come in. But at the same token, let's help our local businesses. The difference between here and the mainland is that you can go across the state border. You don't even have to go across the state, just county lines to work or enjoy the benefits of a different county. Here, this is just us. And we need to do what we can together so that we can rebuild our economy. And we need to start rebuilding. Actually, we should have been rebuilding 6 months ago, 8 months ago. But we just need to start, and we need to start with the businesses to open up and start being productive, start generating revenue, and start employing our people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Adams. Senator Duenas, do you have any comment as a co-sponsor?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for recognizing me. First of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to be here doing business in the People's House once again, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope this becomes the trend going forward and we continue because it sure is something I think that demonstrates to our people that we are moving forward and we are progressing towards opening up Guam and seeing our island open up. Mr. Chairman, I do definitely want to thank Committee on Rules as well as yourself as chairman for demonstrating real collegiality by getting bills out through the core process and to be heard. So we're glad to be here today. Mr. Chairman, the other day, the governor gave a speech to the Chamber of Commerce. And during that speech that the governor gave to the Chamber of Commerce, she made a very bold statement about how it was incredible how a bipartisan effort to ensure that smallest of small businesses, and as Madam Speaker said, those individuals with $250,000 in revenue only pay 3% of, not the 5%. And one of the discussions on this particular issue was that this is what's allowed for this recovery, that the bipartisan effort to make sure that we lowered those thresholds. What I find interesting is it is exactly during this time when the surpluses started to come in. Now, of course, that's being calculated on the 5%. Of course, that's being calculated on a number of different issues. But we have to admit, that's what happened when the 5% went into effect and when it went to 3% and the thresholds were lowered for those businesses who are small businesses. We experienced 2 full fiscal years of additional revenue, surpluses into this government. We claimed by doing that we've reduced the deficit. Of course, now we have had this pandemic. And we'll be going soon to 1 year of the length of time to which this pandemic has been affecting our island. I agree with the Speaker. We need more information. And I believe in the coming days and weeks, as we go into session, we could get more information and more analysis on the impact of this bill. But to me, Mr. Chair, and members of this body, I believe that if we were able to get this threshold to $250,000 and now to raise it to $500,000, with the enumeration of 85% of the businesses benefiting from these thresholds, I really believe that this has to have a positive impact going forward. In closing, Mr. Chair, I want to say that there is one thing for sure of an impact that we know. If we don't do things, particularly for our smallest of small businesses, we won't have to worry about whether or not they're going to be paying GRT. They go out of business, they don't pay any GRT. They get this additional help. I believe that when we use these numbers of this $500,000 threshold, most, if not all of that money will be reinvested in our economy. These are small businesses, most of them mom and pop businesses. They may be able to bring their employees back full-time that they had to put on part-time. They may add another employee. They may spend this money in the economy improving their businesses. And that cannot be anything less than helpful to our economy, Mr. Chairman. So I hope, as our Madam Speaker said, and others that may comment going forward, and my good friend Senator Toniata, I want to reiterate that it's so important that we get our businesses moving, and of course to the author as well. But I hope that we can get those impacts quickly from the BBMR, from revenue tax, and others. But I just can't help but believe that this is going to be a very strong measure moving forward to get our smallest of small businesses moving forward and even stronger. We celebrated the fact that we did it on a bipartisan basis up to $250,000. Let's celebrate bringing it to $500,000 and help our most needy businesses. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. And I'll proceed on with Senator Tello, and then I'll come back to Senator Brown. All right? Senator Tello.
Sijus Masim, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. And, Mr. Chair, I also like to recognize you as the senator that introduced the bill in the 35th Guam Legislature, Bill 323-35, which now became law at Public Law 35-90, and your foresight in seeing the assistance needed for small businesses. During that time, I proffered an amendment, and I'd like to thank you for allowing it to be retroactive starting in January 1st, 2020, and also including in there an area that was forgotten, and that was the service industry, which was not being able to avail themselves of the opportunity. And we sit here today looking at this legislation. It's unfortunate that BBMR, Mr. Chair, did not provide the information that's really critically needed. And I know that you're not going to, let them get away with it or find a way for them to delay this legislation from being placed on the session agenda, because we know we're going to need that information as we move forward. There's no doubt that we are continuing to help the business community out there, and we found that 250 is the amount for small businesses. But I think that it's moving into another area at $500,000 a year for an individual. You're starting to move into a little bit bigger businesses, but they also too need help. I don't think that we've been able to assist them. And the reason why I'm saying it's always that middle, the middle ground, Mr. Chair. You have those to help those who don't make enough. And then, of course, nobody gets anything if you make too much. But what about the middle ground? We're always left behind. The middle class is always left behind. This is an opportunity now, Mr. Chair. You're at that border to assist those individuals. So again, I look forward, Mr. Chair, to the response from BBMR with the information that is provided and moving forward. And thank you again for the legislation that you proffered last year that is now before us to increase that amount. Sijus Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tadiwi. Senator Brown, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and certainly thank you to our sponsors on this bill who have introduced it. As has been mentioned by my colleagues, of course, this has been a very challenging time this past year in 2020 in dealing with this pandemic. And while the government of Guam, while it's coming soon, but for the most part during this past year, our government hasn't felt as big a challenge with regards to operations as a lot of our small businesses in our community, and also the employees and the members of our community that have invested in their businesses. Many of them, their life savings to operate and continue to contribute to this community. Somewhere in all of this, of course, Mr. Chairman, we need to find a balance to ensure that members in our private sector that need this support, particularly during this time. And I did want to note that our main sponsor, Senator Moylan, did outline that this would be for a period of time to get us through what we are currently experiencing. And this is something certainly as we move forward until we get back to, and it might be some time, of course, till we get back to the level of income and productivity that we had just this time last year before this pandemic hit us. I mean, revenues were coming in and things were looking very promising and everything was moving up. But since that is no longer the case with what we are experiencing, and the hardest hit, obviously, is our private sector, many in our private sector, particularly our small businesses. So I certainly look forward to our committee getting the information that's being requested, but at the same time, certainly thank our main sponsor and our co-sponsors with regards to this legislation, and certainly it has my support. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to comment on Bill 3-36.
Thank you, Senator Brown. For my colleagues, just to turn back the clock just a little bit, as they mentioned earlier, I was the author of the Bill 323-35. I'm just going to read a little bit on the, back then, the impact when we changed we updated the grocery sheet, right, for the small business for a 2-year program from 100 to 250, 0 GRT, and from 250 to 500. Back then, the max gross proceeds exempted would be from current 100,000 to 250. Total about 2% tax exemption is about $5,000. Number of business affected was 1,368. The impact, the estimated impact then to our budget was 6.8 million. That was then in March. Just to keep everybody in mind, exactly what the speaker had asked, that we get more information from BBMR, revenue and tax, so we can take a look at the big picture. And then I'll come back to the committee, I'll come back to the authors, and we'll sit down and we'll take a look at it, and then we measure from there. And exactly what the speaker brought up is maybe we can redirect that tax exemption to hit specifically, like Senator Teller brought up, the middle class, or specifically go after the businesses that are really hurting. The folks that did not get any PPE, didn't get any breaks, and they need the breaks. Because like Senator Adler brought up, the pandemic's not going away, the running out of money is not going away soon enough. There's not enough federal money coming to Guam. And until we reach that point, and I get the information from BBMR, from Revenue and Tax, I will definitely get back with the committee, and I will get with the author of the bill, and we will sit down as soon as possible so we can report this out to the committee, to the floor. And then we can have a live discussion, and we'll call for a committee of the whole so everybody can speak at the same time, pretty much, and hear all the words from everyone, all the experts. All right? Senator Moylan, would you like to give your closing, and then we can proceed to conclude, and we wait for all the information to come in, then we can report this out as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues. In closing, just want to add just a little bit more. Of course, we know that Public Law 35-90, just to kind of reiterate what it actually does, it's for those annual income from $0 to $50,000 threshold. For the first $40,000, if you're within that threshold, and you make less than $40,000 or less, you pay 0 tax. From $4,001 to $50,000, you pay 5% tax. For annual incomes of $50,001 to $500,000 threshold, from the $50,001 to $250,000, you pay 3%, not 5%. So what this bill basically does, instead of the $250,000, it increases that to $500,000. So from $501,000 to $500,000, you'll pay 3%, not the 5%. Now we understand that our budget that we'll be looking at here in a few more months, it's great. Our general fund is impacted, of course, primarily by BBT collections and employee tax as well. And we know with the pandemic going on, our businesses have suffered a lot. And they're behind in rent, and they're behind in other expenses, and now they're hoping to reopen their doors and hire back their employees. But to incentivize them is what we really need to do. And when they know that spending is down 30 to 50%, what do we got to do to get Guam back to work? And that's why this bill was proposed, at least for a temporary period of 2 years for this exemption to happen, and allow them to pay at least 2% less than the total 5% of the BBT. So I'm looking forward to really stimulating our small businesses to get back on their feet and hire the employees so they can generate the BBT or the BBT, and also get their employee taxes paid to help our government in the services that we most desperately need to provide. So thank you for the dialogue. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Being that there's no one here to testify, the committee will continue to receive testimony for the bill. And please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. Augustine at gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuni. And a reminder, my colleague, when I get the information, I will provide it to the author and to all that have attended and all the colleagues. All 15 will get that information as soon as I get that. Jesus Marcy for attendance, participating in today's hearing, and for those at home, thank you for watching. The public hearing on Bill 3-36 is now adjourned at 2:47, or no, 2:42. Thank you, Zeus Marcy. Have a nice day.